Welcome, welcome to Reflect, Recalibrate. Whoop, whoop. We are your lovely lady artivist hosts, the lovely Jana E. Dandridge and myself, Danny Snyder. Today, I know this is weird, y'all, but we are going full radio style. So you'll hear our voices. You'll see our lovely pics if you're watching us on YouTube, but we actually have our cameras off today. Please feel free, though, to keep using the chat to share your thoughts with us as we do this awesome part one to our new collection. So, yeah, today is part one of the Knell of Poetry Collection, where we are exploring how we use language for liberation, asking what strategies are writers using to topple the colonizer's tongue. Before we get into the convo, though, you guys know the drill. We are going to have a quick news bite of the day. Janet's going to take us into the news. It's going to be from, I believe, the Pittsburgh Arts Council again.
Right. You are correct, Danny. Before I say that, though, I have to give a happy solar revolution to one of my longtime friends, Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan, thank you for being you, bro. All right. So here is the news bit of the day. Earlier this month, the Justice Department announced a tentative settlement with Ticketmaster and its parent company, Live Nation, resolving an antitrust lawsuit accusing the company of illegally monopolizing the live events industry. According to PBS, the deal would require Live Nation to pay up to $280 million and divest from at least 13 amphitheaters, while opening its ticketing processes to competitors. The case was originally brought under the Biden administration in 2024, accusing the company of using threats and retaliation to control virtually every aspect of the industry, from concept promotion to ticketing. However, a large bipartisan coalition of more than 30 state attorneys general, including Pennsylvania, declined to join the settlement and continued the trial in Manhattan federal court. Pennsylvania AG Dave Sunday said in a statement that, quote, while the federal government has chosen to settle, Pennsylvania and our partner states are committed to continuing this case to hold Ticketmaster accountable and restore competition to the entertainment marketplace, end quote. The National Independent Venue Association also criticized the settlement, noting that the fine amounts to just 4 days of Live Nation's revenue and includes no explicit protections for fans, artists, or independent venues, according to WHYY. On social media, NIVA, that's the National Independent Venue Association, encouraged live music fans to contact their attorney general using a form that they have on the Pittsburgh website and tell them to continue the Live Nation antitrust case. Earlier today, NIVA also praised a recent report from the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, entitled So Casually Cruel: How Ticketmaster's Monopoly Supercharges Price and Fees.
Yeah.
Well, Danny, what say you?
Oh, I I don't like Ticketmaster, but I personally never had to use it as a musician, but I have never met a musician that had a good experience with Ticketmaster. So, yeah,
Wow.
it does
Wow.
feel like a monopoly, and I guess it is a monopoly, but
Right.
this is something I still need to do research in of what are other alternatives. I'm kind of an ignorant drummer, I guess. I just kind of show up and drum and leave, and I just make sure I leave with money.
Oh no. Oh my God.
No,
Oh.
I'm playing small venues. I'm playing small independent things. Like I've never had to deal with I think the biggest thing I had to do was South by, and it was all through South by. I don't think there was any relationship to Ticketmaster. They had their own setup for everything, but I'm trying to think if there was any show I've ever done where there was a big ticket like company thing like Ticketmaster. I'm not sure.
Hmm. I'm just like 4 days of the revenue. Really?
Mm-hmm.
4 days of the revenue? Come on, y'all. Like, come on, seriously. And then no protections for artists, like
Mm-hmm.
you're saying, fans, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the same rigmarole.
Yeah.
I am not surprised.
Yep. I'm just thinking back to our capitalism discussion from the last collection, which was
Right.
there was so much more we needed to discuss to go into. But yeah, no,
Right.
it's yep, it's capitalism at its best.
Right. Exactly. Well, we can pivot. We can pivot. We are talking about our relationship to language and how we use language today.
Yeah, so
The Knell of Poetry.
we can pose a question to the audience too and to each other. I was thinking we could start with just talking about just us personally, what are our relationships to language?
Yep. Yep. Exactly. The first thing that I think about when I think about language is slang.
Mm-hmm.
I think about the slang terms that I used growing up in Washington, D.C., and learning in other places that I lived, and the difference in slang and how maybe there's the same word, but it means something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it. I love that there's this language that not everybody completely understands, but you know that when you speak to your people, they will feel you and they'll understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like that. I don't want to, leave anybody out, but at the same time, culturally, it's significant. It's significant to have that way of communicating when I'm not necessarily using the mother tongue.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about the colonizer's language. I am of the African diaspora. I don't know which language I would have spoken
Yeah.
if I was living on the continent, and that would have been my mother tongue. Right now, this American English, I'm reluctant to say it, but it is my mother tongue. It is. It's the language that I heard in the womb. It's the language that I came out talking with my family and family, right? Or came out, listening to my family and then started to develop and I learned in school. But it's hard for me to say that's the mother tongue. It's really
Yeah.
hard. Um, because again, the colonizer's language, I, I don't I don't feel that. I don't feel good by having to acknowledge that the American English is my first language.
Yeah. Yeah, going back to what you said before, specifically about slang, I think a lot about with my students their codes. They and I had this too. When I was a kid, we had codes, right? Like things that only we understood, like the kids understood. And and I see it with my students, like, okay, they get it, I don't get it, and that's totally okay. They're allowed to have those codes, right? And I think it's fun. It makes language fun. And as far as yeah, the colonizer's tongue, that's something I was thinking about a lot as going into this episode, or what are some of the strategies that people use for decolonizing language. And yeah, I'm really interested in learning more about how particularly with like indigenous languages, but all sorts of languages, how they're reviving, how they're being revitalized, how they're they're coming more to the mainstream, and that it just exposing people to the language, you know what I mean, even if they don't understand it, just exposing them to these different sounds, these different words, dialects, you know what I mean.
Right, right. I think that is extremely important when it comes to, the first thing that came to my mind was empathy, but
Mm-hmm.
I think just as far as being able to live in the world. And I just want to make sure I heard you correctly because my brain is doing a little something today. Because I'm a little sick, y'all.
Yeah. Well,
But
it's weird. It's so hard to do this without seeing you. I've never like I know we talk on the phone sometimes, but not seeing you and your reactions makes it definitely
right,
difficult. So, but it's good. I'm gonna like
right,
extra
right,
listen today to your words, which is totally in theme with our show. We got this.
right. All things happen for a reason, right? I'm just
Yeah.
saying. I'm just saying. So knowing or having an understanding at least, or not dismissing someone because you don't understand. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I, I'm thinking about so many different places I've been in
Mm-hmm.
where I am speaking like I normally speak. I know that obviously certain slang terms people wouldn't understand, so I'm not using them as much as I would. Um, but if I'm speaking in a way that is endearing in
Mm-hmm.
places that I grew up, that is not condescending, that is not dismissive,
Mm-hmm.
and then someone looks to that and they say, "Oh, that is condescending, that is dismissive."
Mm-hmm.
I then think, hmm, I guess you just aren't open to understanding how different people communicate.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to be nasty, right, when you're communicating with someone. It's another
Mm-hmm.
thing to just have someone who is speaking the way they normally speak
Mm-hmm.
with a nice tone, right? Like
Yeah, it's about
I'm
intent, right?
right, 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 right. Intention,
Mm-hmm.
art, intention. And we hope that our audience can gather or have at least an understanding of our intention, but we know they're going to interpret it
Mm-hmm.
totally different. And you know what? That's okay. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. It's okay. They don't have to come back and critique in a mean-spirited way because they don't understand, but we know how critics are. And it's just like, y'all, ugh, boo. Um, but in the chat, someone asked about examples of slang. The first one that comes to my mind in DC is one of those classic slang terms from, well, at least I see it as the 80s and the 90s, Joe. Like you refer to people as Joe. And then I think in the 2000s, people started saying Mo. So you'll be
Yeah.
like, "Hey Mo, what's up?" Or Joe.
Yeah.
That was crazy, like that type of thing. And so if I'm going to someone in one of these like academic settings, and I'm like, "Joe," they're gonna be like, okay, but so what? I'm talking to you in an endearing way. You can just ask me,
Mm-hmm.
well, my name isn't Joe, so why are you referring to me as Joe? And then
Okay.
you can learn something. And then
Yeah.
you can learn something. What about you? Any slang that comes to your mind?
Well, it's funny you just said Joe because it made me think of the word Karen, which I have some issues with. Just because I happen to
Oh,
have a lot of friends named Karen, and so I that's why I don't like using the word. I still chuckle sometimes when people use the word, but it does kind of bother me a little bit. But I don't think I've ever like really shamed anyone or anything like that when they use the word Karen. But um, one that my students use a lot. Sorry, what?
I was just going to say one of my sister's names is Karen. So,
Yeah, I have a lot of friends named Karen, but the one term that my students use a lot is cooked. Like I'm cooked, miss. I'm cooked, Miss Danny. And so this has become one of my favorite ones lately. So that's one that comes to my mind. But I feel like in this area, you know, I sometimes hear some slang, not as much like as when I lived up in DC and maybe in some other areas. There is some like maybe country slang. A lot of people, say things like ain't and y'all and things like that. I don't know if I would even consider that slang, but I did have an experience what was it, just a week or two ago where I was in a school. I won't say what school it was, but I was like a guest teacher in this classroom and I used the word ain't and I misconjugated a word. I said, oh, they was doing something, and and I don't do that very often, but sometimes it just comes up just because, the kind of circles that, I hang out with. But I, the teacher who I, just as a disclaimer, I really like this teacher and have a lot of respect for her, but she very respectfully addressed my use of ain't and my misconjugation to the class to make it very clear that we don't speak like that here. And I was like, ooh. And I have some mixed feelings about that. I have some mixed feelings about that. I wasn't embarrassed. I didn't feel shamed or anything like that, but I definitely was like, my prison abolition framework was kind of like red alert, red alert, red alert. And it just felt very controlled. It felt very, very controlled. And I do like that this teacher and many of the teachers this school really model professionalism to the students. They're like, hey, this is your job. You come to school. This is your job. You get paid in grades later. You get to cash those grades in. But that address felt just like, okay, we really control language here. And it made me a little uneasy. So I wasn't really sure how I felt about that. And it made me wonder, like, am I a bad teacher that I sometimes misconjugate words in front of my students? I don't want to model unprofessionalism. You know what I mean?
Right. I think that your spidey sense going off made perfect sense because related to what is professionalism? How has it been defined culturally? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're going into school, and I'm not well versed in what I'm about to say, so I'm not going to go delve into it, but this idea of being told how to think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not being given the opportunity to participate in how you learn in a way that is productive all the time, but more often than not being told this is A, B, and C, therefore you need to do it like this, A, B, and C.
Mm-hmm.
If a child has an understanding or going into any school that, yes, there is what is considered proper English, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
according to grammar, etc., right? Like based on English from England.
Mm-hmm.
However, people have colloquialisms that we use. I would go as far as saying a dialect that we use.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is in a classroom and they're speaking their dialect and they also understand how to utilize that English, then it shouldn't be considered something that is so awful, right? And when you consider professionalism, again, going back to who determines what professionalism is,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
why is it this very rigid way of functioning? I call myself a professional artist because this is my career. It's part of my career. But the idea of, well, you need to have more professionalism, it always
Do
rubs
people
me a little
actually
bit.
do people actually say that to you?
No, no, I've
Oh,
just
okay.
heard it.
Okay.
I've just
Okay.
heard it. And then like I've definitely no one has said that to me. I've definitely heard it. And it
Mm-hmm.
just is like, like I mean, as long as somebody not coming up in here doing a strip tease in front of, 5-year-olds, like it's all good. Like that totally they are being their professional selves, but like, no, you're not gonna do it in a room with children. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So I don't professionalism is something I've been thinking about for a little while. Just do I want to utilize that word if somebody is approaching how they work in a different way? Something that's not detrimental, nor is it um, hurting or harming anyone, but they're just approaching how they work in a different way. So if I'm saying, oh, you're not being professional, then that feels like I'm dismissing who they are and how they work.
Yeah, right now. What's coming to my mind is how politicians are dropping the F bomb all over the place now. That used to be, I feel like that would have been considered unprofessional before, but now Are they still professional if they're dropping the F-bomb when they're on an interview? I don't know. I don't
Hmm.
know.
Right. Well, yeah. Like, but it's okay. They don't care. It's okay for them to do it because they're the colonizer. I'm just gonna say it like that.
Right. Right.
It's
And
okay for
they're
them
the
to do
ones
it.
who I think what I'm getting at is they're the ones determining what is defined as professional or not, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah. Uh, in the chat, if you all want to share, what is your relationship to language? Slang, colloquialism, vernacular, dialect, etc. What's your relationship to language? It's a very broad question. We're
It,
leaving it open so that you can answer in the way that feels comfortable to you.
yeah, I'm thinking a lot about how I'm learning languages as well. And in the process of learning, like Spanish, for example, learning how one word can have multiple meanings depending on, yeah, what region you're in, kind of like what you were saying before. I love language. I'm very interested in learning. In fact, actually, my students, they always remember when I say this, but I love to do a check-in with my students every day where we just go around and we answer a question like, what was the scariest thing you've ever had to do? Or one time maybe like what would your superpower be if you could choose any superpower? And a lot of my students always remember what I say, because I say it every time, is that if I had a superpower, it would be to speak every language in the world. And sometimes with my little kids I say even whale. So I
Ah,
yeah, I speak whale. um it's I'm like, what an amazing superpower that would be, right? I would choose that over flying. I would choose that over invisibility. I would choose that over anything. And if I had more time, I probably actually would try to learn more languages. It's hard to, it's really hard to find a time right now to study Spanish. And I feel like I'm losing it so quickly ever since I moved from Mexico back to the States. But it's, it, in some ways, it gives me more respect for my mother tongue. And, you know, what you brought up earlier too kind of made me think, well, like, I have an an interesting ancestry, and it would be really cool to learn more about the actual languages of my ancestry instead of these other languages that I'm interested in, like Spanish, for example. Or you know, I
mhm.
do have some German blood, and I at one point was learning German, but I have a lot of Czech in me, and I'd like, wouldn't that be cool to learn Czech, for example?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
that I just think it'd be really cool to learn all those things. But and it's amazing because I've had some friends like I had a couple of friends back in Austin in this West African group that I used to perform with, and each one of them spoke at least seven languages. Like at least
Wow.
seven. They would joke around like who could speak more. Oh, I could speak eight. I could speak nine. I was, and it'd be funny listening to them talk to their friends, and they would just switch languages in the middle of a conversation. They'd be talking to the same person, but they halfway through the conversation they just switch. And so it just that amazes me. To me, that's one of the coolest superpowers that you could have.
Here we are going into the education of the United States of America
Mm-hmm.
child. So let's move that into literature
Yeah.
and specifically poetry.
What's your relationship to poetry? Mm-hmm.
Well, my first step into poetry came from my mom. My mom writes poetry all the time. Matter of fact, I am working on her book right now, Lady Butterfly. And
Mm.
she introduced me to poetry at a very young age. And one of the books that I remember always is Honey, I Love by Eloise Greenfield. And that book was just such a wonderful piece of art for me. I saw
Mm-hmm.
myself in that book. I could relate to the very simplistic approach to writing. And
Mhm.
I always wanted to go back and read that book. How about you?
I just looked up that book. I've seen this book before at our school. I have not read it, but I've seen this before at one of the schools that I teach at. This looks like a beautiful book. Yeah,
Yes, it is beautiful.
I loved reading poetry as a kid. I remember I so if we really get deep into personally our personal relationships with language, I actually had some speech issues as a kid and was in speech therapy till early 5th grade. And so much emphasis was put on me learning how to talk right that people weren't really pushing me to read. And so I actually managed to go a couple years with fooling my teachers into them thinking I knew how to read, but I actually didn't know how to read. So I managed to fake it for
Oh,
a long time. And then finally, it was around 5th grade where I really started to actually learn how to read, which is so embarrassing. Like I knew a little bit before, but like it didn't really feel like till 5th grade it was starting to click because all these issues I was having with pronouncing words, once I learned better how to read, I was like, now I'm understanding better how to pronounce some of these words, which the English language is really hard for understanding how to pronounce words. The few times I've tutored my Spanish speaking friends and clients in English, man, it is a very difficult language. And again, that's one of those things I'm saying. It kind of gives you some more respect for your language as you're learning other languages. But I once I started learning to read, novels and books were very intimidating to me because they were so long. And to this day, I'm actually still a very, very slow reader. But poetry, I was like, it just was less intimidating to me. I was like, I can do this. I can read a poem before I go to bed. But whereas reading a chapter of a book was really intimidating. And so I got super into poets like Shel Silverstein. And later on, I got interested in writing poetry. Then I had some pretty traumatic experiences in high school with my English teachers. And it's kind of amazing I ever continued to write after that. But
oh wow.
yeah, and I really mean it, like pretty traumatic. It is kind of amazing I have any interest in writing. But the poetry part, it's like one of my high school teachers really made me feel like there's only a right or wrong, there's always one right interpretation to a poem and all other interpretations are wrong, which confused me both as an artist and as a reader. I and again, here's an old white man telling me this, that I'm supposed to interpret this poem the same way he does. And of course, all the poems we're reading are by white poets, right? In fact, that was something that it wasn't until I got to university I realized all through middle school and high school. I was like, I don't think I ever read a single book like through school or any kind of poet that was black, that was maybe there might have been a few female poets in there that we read. But I was like, I don't think I read anything by a person of color while I was in middle school and high school, like within the public school system. So it wasn't until university, and that goes for theater too. Like I never knew who August Wilson was until I was a freshman in college. That's kind of insane to me to go through a pretty intense theater program in high school and not know who August Wilson is. Just as one example.
Right.
So
That,
university is where I really started catching up on all these other writers that are out there in the world, right? And that, of course, there's going to be different interpretations based off of your background. Even just me and my male white English teacher as a woman, we're going to interpret this poem that is clearly about sex in very different ways, right? So yeah, that's a
right.
summary of my relationship growing up with poetry and with words.
Gosh, so much of this is related to miseducation and the lack of empathy
Mm.
and the lack of cultural understanding. And looking at what is supposed to be standard and trying to mold a person into that standard. And as artists, that don't work.
Mm.
That does not work at all. I've heard different stories of traumatic experiences that people have had with educators growing up and how they could have gone in a different direction that would not have been beneficial to their lives if they did not remove themselves from that situation in a particular way or had another adult counter what the persons who's traumatized them did.
Mm-hmm.
And this absolutely relates to how we write, how we communicate with each other verbally, and what it is that we're interested in reading.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have exposure to a variety of voices, then you are going to be stuck in one place unless you are exposed and you went to university and teachers were able to give you that knowledge and open your mind further. And thank goodness that happened. Everybody doesn't have that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So then we rely on what we were talking about initially, culturally, that language that we have with each other, that slang, the colloquialisms, how we can feel comfortable, be creative within the spaces where we are appreciated and where we're loved. I just speaking of academia, I
Mm.
actually, one of the questions that I had regarding language is why. This is the opposite side. I'm glad you had a great experience in academia. The opposite side is
That's not
why.
necessarily true, but
I mean, in reference to just being exposed to more writers, right? Just being
for
exposed to
sure,
more
for
writers,
sure.
like a variety culturally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I've always been just disgusted by how esoteric academic texts can
Mm.
be.
Oh my
I'm
God, I'm
like, oh
so
my
glad you
gosh,
said that. And
gatekeepers.
you're like adjunct faculty, so I'm so glad we can have this conversation. Yes, please continue. I'm sorry.
It's gatekeeping
Mm-hmm.
to the utmost.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not one for it. I'm like, hey, you could have said this in like 2 pages, but we
Yeah.
have about 5 chapters of you using all kinds of 10-syllable words simply because this is supposed to be what is standard and this
Yeah.
is professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, you are cutting off a whole bunch of people who might want to learn about this as well. Now you have other
Mm-hmm.
ways to learn about different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're out there. But the place where we go to learn, have higher education, if we are then in that place and being told that we have to read these esoteric books and we have to um figure out what it means, and it might be challenging for some people to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Or if we interpret it in a certain way, then we might be redirected to think of it in a different way because,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is actually what the author is talking about. I have not ever liked academic text, and I always
Mm-hmm.
read them because it's just part of the work that I do. But when I see an academic text that I'm like, okay, no, you're going overboard.
Mm-hmm.
These words are so unnecessary. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to read your work anymore. I don't want to read your work anymore. Um,
But it's like when a
but
rap
I
artist does it, I'm totally okay with it. But when an academic
but
does it, I'm like, I am not okay with this.
wait a minute, wait a minute. A rap artist is not going to. I mean, a rap artist is not going to purposely, like, I don't know, some people do. I'm not going to say that. I'm generalizing. I have no idea. I know there's some people who purposely just want to be like, oh, let me catch them off guard.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's more poetry where you can enter it
Oh, yeah.
however you want,
Mm-hmm.
and you can interpret it how like you want to interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas academic texts, is unless it's a medical text right? Where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, yeah, these words are literally related to what I need to know as a medical student or someone who's interested in medicine, right? I'm not trying to have all of this gatekeeping in my
Mm-hmm.
face. It's already enough gatekeeping in
Mm-hmm.
the world. So,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm going to search for academic texts that are approachable,
Yeah.
that are manageable, you
Mm-hmm.
know? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. It's just thinking about when you brought up going into
Mm-hmm.
academia, that's what I thought about immediately.
Thank you
But
so much for sharing that. I am completely in alignment with you, and I feel such gratitude right now because, as I mentioned, I'm a very slow reader. I got a very late start into reading, and I have had this insecurity ever since I went to university of like, oh my God, I can't read these kind of texts. And I got good at it. I got much better at it, but there are so many times I'm reading a book and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like really like and and it's this insecurity of like, are you trying to make me feel stupid? And then how much time am I going to spend decoding what you're saying than actually reflecting on the message and then putting that towards my research or putting that towards whatever action it is that I'm taking. And so it was so frustrating to me. And if I could tangent for a second, I just want to share real quick. When I was in university, when I was in my master's program in Germany, there the whole department was pretty much old white men. And there was one younger woman, and I'm just gonna not I'm not gonna say any names when I tell the story, and who knows what it looks like now because this was a couple of years ago, maybe 5 or so years ago, and oh gosh, maybe even 10 years ago. Oh, okay, so it's been a minute, but I'm just realizing now how old I am. But it when I was doing my thesis, I wanted to go to the female professor to do my thesis with. And honestly, it was because she was the one who gave me so many opportunities while I was doing my master's. She was like, hey, there's this conference in Portugal. I think you should go perform at it. And I was like, perform? And she was like, yeah, that's what you do, right? You're an artist, right? And I'm like, I am. So I don't have to read an essay. And she's like, no, come do like some show, come do some one woman show or do something fun. And I was like, yes, I'm 100% there for it. And she got me another conference in Venice, and she was having me do all sorts of things. So of course, I'm going to go to her to do my thesis, right? I'm like, she gets me. She understands what I'm trying to do here, that I am not a typical academic that just writes essays and books. But I would say 90% of the students in this program, which was a very small program, were women, which was really cool for me of like being surrounded by all these amazing, smart women. But I could not believe how many of my female colleagues, were discouraging me from going to this one female professor to do my thesis with because she did not have as much of a name as some of my other male professors whose names were more widely recognized. And they also said, she's going to give you a better grade than they are. They're going to be harder on you. And so, even so, when I got an A on my thesis, I got a little bit of pushback from some of my female colleagues who were like, oh, well, you got an A because you went to her and she's nicer. And I was like, she is not nicer. Like, wait.
wow.
And also what I was so grateful was like when I talked to my female professor about this thesis I wanted to do, I told her, I was like, I want this to be something that I publish and I want it to be digestible for anyone. I do not want it to single people out. And it is a book, and it is about artivism and the prison abolition movement, and it is available on Amazon. It's not the best place to sell things, but right now it's the only place I've got it for sale. But I was so grateful that she recognized that I wanted to make it accessible for anyone. And I did not want this thick scholarly language. And she was 100% for it. She was like, I get it. And so it ended up being an awesome experience, and I'm so grateful for having her in that experience. But that was how that went down.
Hmm. Gatekeeping. They're like, oh no, go to them because,
Mm-hmm.
hey, as professionals, they'll be able to give you more clout. But why not go to the person that you're comfortable with and help them build their resume?
Exactly. Exactly.
Why not?
Yeah.
That is so discouraging. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that story because it happens too often. Too often it happens. And then later on, you know, people are like, yeah, nope. I didn't do what I wanted to do, and here I am with these regrets.
Yeah.
And that does happen, unfortunately. I want us to keep it moving because we're at 141 right now. I want us to talk about more about this poetry and um, how it relates to the current political moment, the politics of being in the United States of America, being in this global economy.
Mm.
And one of the things that I heard this week, I think it was, when I was just, looking for different ideas about, what we're going to be talking about and what's related to what we're talking about today, the Knell of Poetry. I was listening to Amanda Seals on IG, and um, she used something called PSYOP. Language as a PSYOP is how I then thought about it. And this is the definition so that we can all be on the same page.
Thank you.
PSYOP is a psychological operation. It is a concerted and planned effort of manipulation to distort truths, to assert a response. It is a decisive tactical tool that is disseminated amongst the people to invoke a response that can be utilized for repression, suppression, etc. And then someone asked, well, is propaganda a psyop? And she was like, yes,
Hmm.
propaganda is a psyop. It's so many different ways that we utilize language or communication arts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
propaganda is absolutely one of them. There was a moment in 2017 where I was doing an internship in Paris. And this was, oh gosh, was it 20? Oh yeah, this was 2017. And I was walking around with one of the artists from another country, from Australia. And we were talking about politics in both of our nations. And this person told me that they didn't realize that racism was so bad in the United States. And I was just I was just like, what, say what now? And over the years, I, realized, well, yeah, that person is a white person in Australia where the Aborigines have consistently
Mm-hmm.
been dealt with in harmful ways. I'll just say it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because of the propaganda she's getting from the United States of America, she did not take the time to consider that, oh, there might also be something else going on in the United States that I don't know about. But I'm just going to focus on this propaganda. I'm just going to focus on this one way of receiving information, this one usage of communication, this one way that we use language to communicate. And it always sticks with me because I had to learn that, wow, you know what? Everybody doesn't know. They really actually don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to have these conversations. Well, you don't have to, but if you choose to, you can have conversations so that they can be informed. And that's how Fluidity, my arts centered educational experience, came about, because I was just like, yo, I want to have a conversation with different artists around the world and talk about what's going on politically, socially, and where do we relate and what can we exchange. But language as a psyop, a psychological operation, when examining texts, when reading, you definitely are being influenced, right? You are imagining, you are taking in the words, and they are being digested in a certain way that can appeal to you or disgust you or whatever other thought in between and around those things. I I I like to move away from how language is used within my work. For example, on my website, my homepage, first of all, I was like, nope, don't want no pictures on my homepage. And people are like, what are you doing? That's not the professional way of doing it. But I'm like, this is me. I'm expressing myself. At that on that homepage, there is no punctuation at the end of the paragraph. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, that means it's continued.
Mm-hmm.
I recently was writing an artist statement, and I added letters to a word that we know, like wide. I put multiple I's in it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because I wanted people to say it in their minds and
Mm-hmm.
see it and be able to feel it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Putting spaces in certain places where they may not necessarily go. Capitalizing, being using lowercase when maybe it's not, necessarily what is for standard American English,
Mm-hmm.
right? So language as a psychological operation in the way that Amanda Seals defined it is absolutely negative, right? Is this is not what I want to do. But language in a way that is psychologically stimulating and helps
Mm.
us open up our minds in how we approach language, how we approach literature, how we approach
Mm-hmm.
poetry, I
Mm-hmm.
think is necessary. So when we're reading poetry, we can read between the lines, we can insert ourselves into those spaces. We can
Mm-hmm.
take a deep breath. We can allow ourselves to imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have like that's what's so fun about reading before seeing the movie, right? And reading the book before you see the movie is you can imagine it in your own mind before someone tells you what it's supposed to look like, right? Something I was thinking about recently was that, when I go to see a movie or when I go to see a play, when I go into this liminal space, I go into this theater and I have a couple hours in this theater to absorb the story. And then I leave this liminal space. And now I can take all these thoughts and feelings and do something with them or not do anything with them. But if the artivism was effective, then I'm probably going to do something, whether it be signing a petition or going to a protest or making my own project, whatever. But what's really interesting about a book is that unless you read the whole book in a day, which you can totally do, you're investing multiple days into the process. And so you have lots of time to reflect, to digest all those feelings, to digest all those thoughts, and then go back to the work and then go back to reflect and go back to the work and go back and reflect. And so I feel like this totally makes sense why they say storybooks and literature is the best way for building empathy because you just get so invested, right? And it it tends to, for me, I don't want to speak for everyone, I'm just speaking for myself. When I read a novel or a long collection of poetry, I feel like I remember it and I sense I have it in my body more. I don't know how to really say, like I feel like I've embodied it more than I have a movie or a play, for example.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Bringing in somatics, right? How it's moving through your body. And that's why it's so important to, and you put some great quotes in our notes to understand that having the what you refer to linguistic liberation in our notes,
Mm-hmm.
uh, being able to feel that, knowing
Mm-hmm.
that it's connected to your spirit as opposed to connected to something that is looking to force you into a position of labor and to do something that you might not want to do, to be able to survive in the capitalist structure.
Mm-hmm.
So you then subvert it, right? And figure out ways in which you can enjoy it and you can express yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You you put um you put some quotes in here from Gogi Wa Tiong, from an article that we read about his work, Decolonizing Language and Other Revolutionary Ideas. And it says the mission of Decolonizing Language, a collection of 20 essays. The revolutionary idea encapsulated in the book's subtitle is an incisive rejection of the notion that European languages are inherently global and best able to carry intelligence and universality, or that they function as the languages of power and normality. And then the other quote, for most of the 1960s and 1970s, Gogi Wationg shared a belief common among the post colonial elite that a literature in the ex colonizer's language could indeed be revolutionary. But now the novelist had decided to break away from English, to depart, as he put it, from Anglo Saxon literature in order to reconnect to the patriotic traditions of a national and cultural literature rooted among the people. He would henceforth write in his mother tongue, Kikuyu. So, how would that feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about mother tongues. If you were to go into that same show, that same theater production, and you heard your mother tongue, you were talking
Mm-hmm.
about the different languages and the people, your ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
How would that feel? We're already talking about the feeling in our bodies, right? How
Mm-hmm.
would it then feel if it's in your language, right? Like of your people,
Yeah, and especially if you've never heard it before,
right?
and it's now your first time ever hearing your language. When I was on my trip to Alaska last year, it was interesting learning from some indigenous people my age who did not know their mother tongue and were trying to learn it and were trying to find ways to document it and to save it, and their experiences with hearing words for the first time. That was wild to me, and the emotional response that they had to that.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, I think, like, yeah, even if you didn't understand it, that would be a huge turning point in your life.
Right. Um, our guest who's coming in on part two of the Knell of Poetry Collection, when we were talking with her, and we're talking about decolonizing the colonizer's language.
Mm-hmm.
Danny, you put in here reclaiming the imposed language by breaking its rules, mixing it with native languages, and using it to write back against colonial narratives. Right, one of these ways to have linguistic liberation. Elizabeth Houston shared that there's a sense of homelessness, a sense of homelessness. Where do we belong politically if we feel betrayed by the political groups and communities who, on the surface, look like they're supposed to support us? And so then we are taking language, taking words, and we're creating new words and meanings, recontextualizing language to name realities and
Mm-hmm.
experiences that colonial language failed to express or purposefully hid. Thank you for putting that in there, Danny.
Thank you for reading it. Thank you for actually reading the notes, because I've kind of been ignoring them. And just I kind of went into story time a little bit with this episode. But yeah, I
Yes,
think,
ma'am.
like, looking over these notes that we have, I think if I can be personal one more time today, I had a
This is what we're doing on here, Danny.
yeah,
So this
today.
we always personal. We always personal.
Well, I was thinking one of the things I wrote down under, just some different strategies for linguistic liberation was centering indigenous narratives. And so, for example, again, I'm thinking back to Alaska. I'm thinking back to some of these people my age who are, maybe they don't know their mother tongue, maybe they don't know their language yet, but still, how can they bring their story to the mainstream? How can they share their story with others outside of their community, outside of their family? And it made me think of when I was in Austin and I was a screenwriter. And I say was because I haven't really wrote since then. But while I was a screenwriter, I would try really hard to write. I wouldn't say really hard. I wanted to do it, but I liked writing stories with diverse casts. And whenever I looked into funding for producing these scripts, all the grants that I saw were for screenwriters of color. And I had to take a step back, and it kind of, I decided ultimately, I was like, you know what? I think right now I need to pause writing and I need to help other filmmakers. I'm getting the message is being received that I need to help uplift the voices of these other writers whose stories are not making it to South by or to any other mainstream channels. And fast forward a few years later, I'm dating a guy, a white actor, and he really wanted me to help him with writing some scripts where he was the lead. And I told him, I was like, I'm not really writing right now. I enjoyed doing it, but I'm doing other things now that I'm enjoying more and I'm more interested in. He's like, oh, but you were such a great writer, and da da da. And I was like, yeah, but I don't. That's not really what's important to me right now. I'd rather, again, focus on helping to uplift these other stories that are not being told, or that are not being heard by the mainstream or seen by the mainstream. And it was a bit manipulative, but the way he was like, oh, you're giving up, it kind of made me feel like the Woody Allen quote of like, those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach Jim. It kind of felt like along those lines of like I was giving up
Oh
on this art
gosh.
form because I never made it as a famous screenwriter. And I told him, I was like, no, the truth is I just, that's not what's interesting to me right now. I don't want to do that right now. Maybe one day I'll go back to screenwriting, but I was like, I kind of like right now helping other people. I'm still involved in different projects and things. He could not accept this. He
Right.
really could not accept this. And I was like, this is part of the problem.
Right. Right. It was for him, it was one or the other. And that is one of the white supremacy ideology rules. Like
Mm,
it's one or the other. It can't be multifaceted, you know?
mm-hmm.
So if you aren't going to do it, then that means, oh, you failed. Like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, I just told you I'm considering this holistically,
Mm,
and I'm looking at, oh wow, you know what? I want to participate in this way. That's not appreciated. That's not appreciated because it's not necessarily the way that, we've been taught in this society at all. And he also had a goal. He wanted to be the lead in a story. So
mm,
whatever you were saying didn't really matter.
mm.
Glad you're not with him no more.
Yeah.
So,
That one didn't last very long. It lasted longer than it should have, but
damn.
it wasn't very long.
So, and something you said earlier about bell hooks and like, well, not
Yeah,
about bell hooks, but you were saying something about reading books, and some people read books in one day. And remember what we were
she do.
looking when we reviewed this. I was like, yo, bell hooks read multiple books in one day.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh my God, this goddess. Like,
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. Like, if only, but that's not me. That's not me.
Yeah.
I do. what I do, but I admire bell hooks regardless, like in every way possible. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, speaking to her, the complexities, it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what she was talking about in what we reviewed when she was in that interview with that gentleman talking about her works. She's been interviewed obviously a lot, but the one that we checked out, um, she was just saying, yeah, people expected me to think one way because, I'm this feminist, right? But no, I also have this
Mm-hmm.
background, and
Mm-hmm.
that influences how I think. So no, it's not one way
Mm-hmm.
or the other. So with language, it's not
Intersectionality.
right, intersectionality. So with language, it's the same way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not one way or the other. And then when you are seeking to liberate yourself, uh, then you want to explore, okay, in which ways can I change this up
Mm-hmm.
to make it feel more like, hey, my mother tongue? You know, how can I utilize this language to point out what is going on within our world and uplift the beauty in our world and be able to express myself in the ways that I want. Something else that you put in the notes were key strategies for using literature to impact
Mm-hmm.
social and political movements. And so it's um, 5 steps or five, I should say, strategies offered: humanizing the cause, documentation and exposure, shaping public discourse, offering new perspectives and redefining structures, and offering tactics,
Yeah,
right?
that last
So,
point was to kind of make it a little bit more broad because I feel like there's probably like a million more things you could write here to be much more specific, but basically
yeah, but this
offering
is a
your
great
viewers
overview.
and readers ideas for what they can do. Yeah.
Right, exactly, exactly. And then that new perspectives and redefining structures has stood out to me. Writers can unveil different perspectives of a movement, redefining what is considered good or normal, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, we are at our time. Um, I think I am
We're
full.
going to be good today because you're not feeling well. And I can't believe
Right.
you powered through this. I'm so proud of you and appreciate you. And I hope that listeners know I did not push her to do this.
You know, because I mean,
I believe in
no, you
rest.
did not, Danny. Yes, and I believe in rest too. But I was just looking at our lives and I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it this way. Let's pivot and do it this way. I
Yeah.
am perfectly fine sitting right here, speaking into the mic, doing it radio style like they used to do back in the day. You didn't see
Mm-hmm.
nobody's faces, you just listened. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what? This actually worked very well within this collection, why we are talking about
Yeah.
language and literature. So I hope people are taking in the words, right? Because you cannot see us moving around, making different gestures and whatnot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do love the sound of
So,
your voice. I do love your voice.
yeah, your voice sounds good too. We have some good radio style voices. So,
Mine could use a little work. I get a little squeaky sometimes, but
oh, this she's gonna do like that sometimes. I can't. You are beautiful just the way you are.
you
Okay.
are
So,
beautiful.
thank you, thank you. All right, so let's close this out. Um, thank you all to those who listen in today and to those who are listening in on another day. I want to also acknowledge that, man, I thoroughly enjoy words and
Mm,
how words can make you feel. And so it's important to always use my words with kindness. And I
yeah.
am working on that so hard these days, working in the different spaces that I work. And I'm also thinking about patience
Mm.
and how I have to be patient. I have a 4-year-old, and for all y'all out there who understand, it's about patience and using your words in a way that can be understood by a
Mhm.
4-year-old. Because not only are they taking it in um, uh, um, audibly, they are also taking it in spiritually and physically.
Mhm.
So Language is important. How we use our words,
Mm-hmm.
it's important.
It has power.
Anything you, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it has
Sorry, I was just
power.
that's all I'm gonna say is words totally have power. And back to what you were
Right,
saying about intent, thinking about how we our intent behind our words and how we interpret the intent of other people's words.
right. Opening up the space for dialogue
Mhm.
and opening the space for exploration. So, with that being said, in part two of the Knell of Poetry Collection, we will be chatting with the enchanting Elizabeth Houston, artist, author, performer. So, tune in on April 4th, 2026. That's Saturday, April 4th. Put it in your calendars right now at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be discussing her book with her and many other things as well. We'd like to remind our listeners that this podcast is funded by the two of us and your donations. Please help us keep our podcast going by making a donation through our PayPal link in the show notes below. Alrighty.
All righty.
Well, enjoy the day.
Enjoy the day. Enjoy the rest.
Enjoy the rest.